you're always going to try and get the most grabbing headline, the most sensational story, because that's what sells newspapers.
It's a triumvirate of power. It's the government, the police, and the media.
That night, South Yorkshire Police decided we're in trouble here, so we need to start putting out a different version of the truth. We need to put our own agenda. We need to get the narrative going from our perspective.
When a whole city is affected, I think that means you have the resources of a whole community to respond to the lies and the prejudice.
It never happened that way, as history told you, and it was just so insulting and heartbreaking, because that's the last thing everybody needed.
On the 15th of April 1989, Liverpool Football Club played Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup semi-final. 96 Liverpool supporters never returned. 4 days later, the Sun newspaper published the headline, "The Truth." The perception amongst Liverpool fans when that headline came out that day was just one of probably disbelief, outrage, bemusement that, you know, the newspaper could probably sink that long, while, you know, as supporters were still in mourning, you know, for what had happened just a few days earlier. It's just unbelievable, really, that, you know, that someone could make these lies up and come out with this story which they claim was the truth.
Well, there was somebody who I knew at the game who'd run on the pitch, and he ran straight over to me and said, "Macca, there's people who are struggling and can't get out. There's chaos on the terraces, and it's damning, it's dangerous." And that's when I knew, and I turned around and I had a look, and I can see the carnage that's about to happen. You could see it.
Crowds have a kind of movement about them. It's rather like some sort of sea anemone waving at the base of an ocean. Strange forces kind of ripple them around. Those two pens 3 and 4 as we came to know them, were absolutely solid. And then, of course, it became apparent very quickly that something terrible had happened, but we had no idea how really terrible this was.
And there are fans on the pitch here in the 6-yard area. The referee's going to have to stop the game. There's an overflow behind the goal, and the police inspector is on the pitch. And they've come through the barriers, and I can only think that's overcrowding. It doesn't look to me any sort of misbehaviour. More police are being called for. Reinforcements are coming from the Forest End now to attend to this problem.
One journo told me that the police are saying the fans forced the doors. And of course we didn't know then that, of course, that set the tone for everything that came after.
That's how we knew it was a lie, you know, and it's very hard when you've got such a powerful paper, powerful man behind it, you know, and that's why you've got to take your hat off to the people, you know, the families who fought and fought and fought to get the justice and get them to retract to a certain degree and get people to know what the Sun was all about in them days. And Kelvin Mackenzie, him, you know, how he's got away with it all the years, you know, I mean, still been able to make himself a lot of money, which is all he's been after. I think in many, many ways is amazing.
I think that you have to set the issue of Hillsborough and the Sun, etc., within the political context of the time. It was a Tory government under Margaret Thatcher. The North had been, you know, decimated. We now know that Margaret Thatcher wanted to set in place a managed decline of the city, to kill us by stealth, basically. There was a negative reputation around the city. We had the legacy of a left-wing council who stood up to a government that was putting through cuts, and we paid the price for that. Also, the issue of football hooliganism generally in the country, it was a mixture. And what the government and the state had going for it at the time of the Hillsborough disaster was it was a recipe for cover-up, hooliganism, Liverpool, unemployed, so young unemployed Liverpool hooligans. That was the perception.
What happened with the Sun and with everybody else is that night South Yorkshire Police decided we're in trouble here, so we need to start putting out a different version of the truth. We need to put our own agenda. We need to get the narrative going from our perspective. And it came from the top. But they couldn't do it from their own serving policemen because they were supposed to be involved in an investigation. So they did it through the Police Federation, the trade union, if you like, who could go and speak and say what they liked. And one particular fellow, Mid-Up, was out there all over the media saying it was tanked up fans, it was ridiculous. And they got a MP, Patnick, Tory MP, who was obviously on this side, in law and order, blah, 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 Thatcherite kind of views. And that's how they put it out there. So they fed it to an agency, because then they wouldn't go to one specific paper. So the agency sent the copy to every paper.
With the agenda being passed down to the Police Federation, the cover-up had begun. While many newspapers covered the story as an alleged conversation, the Sun opted to call it the truth. A fatal mistake that proved to be the catalyst and a symbol of rebellion in the fight for justice.
Now, nationally, the Evening Standard were running this, although that's a local paper, but it's read by a lot of influential people. The Daily Mail were running it, and the Times were running it. And by itself, there's nothing wrong with running those allegations, because that's what a news report should be about. You know, I think the Mirror would have put it in copy that this is what's being said, because it happens all the time. But you balance it out and you take a judgment. And that's where the Sun went completely off the scale, off the taste scale. Because they've got an editor there, Kelvin Mackenzie, who's kind of, his USB was, I'm going to beat everyone. I'm going to set the agenda. I'm going to say what everyone's thinking. I'm going to put it out there, and we're going to get, wow, great tabloid journalism. Similar to like during the Falklands War, when the Belgrano was something, gotcha. Stick it up your punter, stick it up your junta. When Neil Kinnock, the 1987 general election, light bulb with Neil Kinnock's head in, with the last person to leave the country to turn the lights off, and you get media people go, oh, this is genius. That's why they sell 4 million copies. So you've got Kelvin Mackenzie, clear agenda against Northerners and Scousers, on the back of kind of, you know, we would perceive to be quite a militant city. Pro-Thatcherite agenda, our boys. South Yorkshire Police have been involved in the miners' strike, so you've got that coming on the back of the miners' strike. They're the good guys, they're the bad guys. Liverpool, simple. Bad agenda against Scousers at the time. Everyone thinks they're whinging, everything's going wrong. Heysel, yeah, we let them away with that, but there you go, hooligans, got that. Whinging Scousers, lefties, how dare they have a go at our boys in blue? That's what we're going on, the truth. And, you know, it was basically to fill Kelvin Mackenzie's idea of himself and how the Sun should be. They didn't really care about the truth. They never did on so many stories. And if you spoke to him then, he said, I don't give a shit about the truth. The truth is what I print, and if I can get away with it, I get away with it. So that's basically the thinking behind why they did that. And other papers shied away from it.
But let's not forget the consequences of those scurrilous headlines. You know, I personally know survivors who committed suicide, survivors who couldn't live with what they were being blamed for. And it took until 2012 with the Hillsborough Independent Panel report to kind of absolve them when David Cameron said, sorry, it was a conspiracy, a cover-up, and lies were told. But also as well, it took until the unlawful killing verdicts in 2016 for those fans to be legally and formally exonerated. And the Sun was partly responsible for that.
Paul Taylor, a communications theory expert and lecturer at the University of Leeds, feels that tabloid newspapers exist as a form of entertainment rather than a serious form of news consumption.
It's long been known that tabloid journalism and newspapers, tabloid newspapers in particular, have told lies. For example, the News of the World published lies for decades, but people found it quite entertaining and people still bought them. They want to titillate and they want to sell as many copies as possible, so they go for the lowest common denominator story. And whatever is scandalous, whatever entices people to read stuff, even if they have a guilty conscience reading it, that's what tabloid newspapers like The Sun go for.
Ruth Stoker, a senior lecturer at the University of Huddersfield, is aware that there is a fine line between entertainment and news, but that the coverage of facts and figures should be the first and basic step for a journalist.
Newspapers, while they're there to inform, are also there to entertain a little bit too, and you can see why they might want to go for something exciting. It's when they step over the line from a story that is exciting into something that is damaging and not factually correct, where there's no basis and no evidence at the back of it, that you then start to think, hang on a minute, there's something not quite right here.
It's definitely dangerous for the public, because public discourse, concepts of democracy, what we understand by public discussions, rationality in our political world, all these quite delicate things get highly damaged by a very jaundiced, structurally biased media.
The Sun's conduct is a difficult one, because the Sun has had a reputation of being a bad boy down the years, and there's no doubt about it. They've gone and done some really daft things over the years, but because they have a reputation of being a bad boy, people are now predisposed to think that everything the Sun does is terrible, and the Sun likes to grab attention. It likes to catch people's attention. So I don't think it's in. I think the Sun needs to do something to try and instill in people a greater sense of trust in what they do, because they have lost trust.
While some newspapers have chosen to govern themselves, many remain under the watchful eye of standards regulators such as Ipso, who have 16 codes of conduct to follow. But not every mistake is brought into account, which forced one city to seek their own style of retribution in the form of the largest boycott in the United Kingdom.
Increasingly, journalism ethics, what I'm finding is it depends on the place of a newspaper in a community, and people are saying to me, if the community thinks this is good conduct, then this is what we should be doing. So what is ethical is how a community feels a journalist should behave.
When a whole city is affected, I think that means you have the resources of a whole community to respond to the lies and the prejudice. So I think it's qualitatively different because of the quantitative difference as well. I think Liverpool does have a unique culture and a unique history. So to some extent, I think they just picked on the wrong city.
The Sun newspaper has witnessed a stark decline in sales across Liverpool and Merseyside following their publication of the Truth headline 29 years ago, with many of the public still refusing to purchase the newspaper since that day. Campaigns have however stepped in to reduce that figure even more, with the Total Eclipse of the Sun campaign just one group seeking to rid Merseyside of the newspaper through a number of different means. Alan Gordon's one of the founding members, who proudly displays banners and stickers in his shop window due to his belief that the Sun newspaper should no longer be visible in his community.
I don't think you can print lies on the front page of a paper and then apologise 6 months later in small print. Main aim of the campaign is to basically, in our opinion, is to get the Sun newspaper out of Liverpool. Some people would stretch that further and to say actually to shut the paper down or to spread it across the north-south of England. Our group basically is only against the Sun newspaper. We're currently now 334 newspaper shops that have stopped selling the Sun in Liverpool. And it's spreading daily basically. What we do campaigning wise, it's spread off in massively different ways. We wrap taxis now, we've got 76 taxis up and running, driving around Liverpool. We leaflet outside the stadiums to away fans to raise awareness. But it's also going into councils and to sort of politicians have also got involved as well.
I totally support the fact of don't buy the Sun newspaper. I think there's an issue with banning it, because I think when you start going into the realms of press freedom and limiting press freedom, then there are issues. And it's a slippery slope, and you appease the right wing in any country. I also think that the best way around the Sun newspaper is to educate people.
I can understand why some people still feel that they want to punish the Sun, but it was a very long time ago now. I think people have a right to choose which newspaper they want to read. To a certain extent, newspapers are aren't doing as well anyway as online news providers. So you can try and ban sales of the Sun in a shop in Liverpool, but people will still, maybe, who want to read the Sun, will go online and find the Sun. So I think there's a lot going on there with that particular campaign. They're just wanting to make a point and continue to make a point. I think it's very unfair on the shopkeepers that they have to put up with people harassing them over the sales of the Sun. But if the people of Liverpool don't want to buy it, that's absolutely fine as well, because it's their choice as to whether they want to support the Sun or not.
Certainly none of our admin team members have been aggressive anyway to shopkeepers. We asked them politely if they would like to not sell the Sun. They have a right to sell it. If they want to sell it, that's fine. But I also have the right as a consumer not to buy from them. That's how our boycott works. It's not an aggressive boycott. It's never been threats to burn down shops that sell it. It's a simple, guys. If you choose to sell it, that's up to you. But I'm certainly not shopping in your shop.
So we should never underestimate the value of a grassroots campaign when people working class people have good values and morals. When they are offended to such an extent that they get outside and build a bonfire and then mount a campaign, never underestimate the power of good people.
While the Sun is becoming a rare sight on Merseyside, it is still the highest selling newspaper around the United Kingdom. But is this down to a change in ethics, or has it changed its conduct at all?
In my view, it's gone worse because they're given the green light to do it. Those sort of headlines of gotcha, and the total disregard for the loss of lives, etc. Absolutely horrendous. Now they can operate largely with impunity because we have such a right-wing government where all our rights are being eroded, where you're given the green light to speak about immigrants in such a negative way, to speak in a way whereby you can perpetrate and perpetuate lies with impunity.
I think there's so much political bias in the news and dodgy deals, and the Murdoch press as a broad stroke is just has its own agenda that doesn't really care about whether things are factually correct or not, or doesn't care about whether it's a complete biased view of things, because they just want to sell the papers and make the most that they can. And I think that doesn't really provide people with a good basis to form an analysis of what's happening at the moment. I definitely think it would help to have more of an ethical guideline, just in the sense of making sure that things aren't sexist or racist or homophobic. But I think a guideline can only go so far. There has to be a change in the culture of journalism.
Most print journalism is designed as eye candy to attract the attention. Actual facts and actual substance come much further down the process. So again, I think it's a structural problem in print media. It's not designed so much to tell the truth as to keep eyes on pages.
The likes of Mackenzie could not get away with the stuff he does now, because apart from anything else, it's dated. People just look at it and go, are we supposed to believe that? You still pick up a copy of the stuff. It's more comical now than it is dangerous, really. I think that's the point, because it doesn't have the power. It is wary of what it says. It knows it's going to get hammered if it's printed something which is going to cause major upset. And let's not forget the economic boycott that Liverpool people did. Probably the most successful economic boycott of a newspaper, certainly in this country, a mass circulation newspaper. And that's the threat. So people now go to so for example, if you do a campaign against the Sun, which happens, they go, well, Liverpool people did it all those years. We can.
If we're looking at the Sun, there's a very set political ideology that it follows, that it propagates, that it tries to disseminate. So with that as a basis, then, knowing the kind of political ideology it has, which is this neoliberal whatever, I think we can see that from there are other opinion pieces that actually the things that protect people from getting hurt are not recognised and are not respected. I think that maybe because of how we consume media at the moment, there's a different method of pushing that agenda that seems like it's much more visible. Like, you know, maybe because of the internet or Snapchat or whatever, you know, like, I feel like maybe that's why it feels that way, but I feel like there has always been quite a right-wing agenda to certain newspapers that fail to recognise nuances of daily life.
People have lost trust in traditional newspaper brands, and so they are turning more to social media channels. So I think that makes it even more important that the traditional news industry works hard to re-establish trust with its audience, because they have the infrastructures to check things out. And as long as people act in an ethical way and focus on making sure that the information they gather is properly checked, is backed by evidence, because that really is the first part of the editor's code, is accuracy. Is what is being published accurate? And I think we have to hang on to that as the gold standard. You know, we need to make sure that whatever gets out there is accurate, and the traditional news brands need to establish trust that, yeah, what does go out there is accurate. And I don't think we're there. I don't think we're at a point where the general public feels sufficiently confident in our traditional brands to turn to them for accurate sources of what's going on.
If you saw a total change in that newspaper, the content, you'd go, well, okay, you know, Mackenzie went too far and those journalists under him, they've gone now. But it's not, because you have to go to the heart of who owns it. And, you know, who owns it is such a powerful, it's so powerful that they're never going to, you know, report things the way you want. And we just said, no, we're fighting a campaign. And it's gone too far for apologies now.
They know what sells. Interested in selling newspapers. If they could put worse things on the front without, you know, being legally challenged, they would. That's what it's all about. Making a buck.
You just have to look at the national surveys on trust. Journalists are right down at the bottom of the pile. Yet if you were to go and talk to people in Liverpool about whether they trusted the Liverpool Echo, they'd say, oh yeah, good paper. People who read the Liverpool Echo trust it, but it's a local paper, and the Liverpool Echo is very mindful of its community and its position in the community. But unfortunately, journalists are all branded as untrustworthy as a result of phone hacking, etc.
Newspapers still have a role and an influence, but is it as insidious as it was? I don't think it is.
Ultimately, the Sun will survive. Ultimately, the Hillsborough controversy will not finish off the Sun. But I do think it has done long-term, difficult to quantify damage to the Sun's whatever type of reputation it had. It definitely has been damaged. So these things sometimes take a long time to pan out, but I'm sure if they had their time again, not for any noble or ethical reasons, but I'm pretty sure the Sun wouldn't run with that article again.